everybody, welcome back to Kraken Academy Productions. On Tuesday, we did a character backstory with a timeline with Mr. Miyagi and Okinawa, and how that history will tie into the show. Today, we'll be doing a similar video with Jon Crease's backstory, including a bit about Terry Silver. Oh, and just to get this straight, when I said I'm confident we'll get a teaser on Sunday, I didn't mean like the actual trailer. I mean like a small, tiny look at the show to get our hopes up. Since Miyagi is the bringer of Miyagi-Do to the United States, in the same way Jon Crease is the bringer of Cobra Kai to the United States. Cobra Kai is a South Korean style of martial arts, and the teacher of Jon Crease and Terry Silver is Kim Sung-young of South Korea. Let's start our timeline for Jon Crease. Jon Crease's first thing we can put on the timeline is when he met Terry Silver. He met Terry Silver in early 1969. Terry Silver was 17 when he joined the war, because he lied about his age. So he was born in 1951. He probably turned 18 towards the end of 1969. Kreese was probably much older, but we don't know exactly when he was born. But it's said that he was born in 1941. But I'm not sure Kreese is that old, though, because the actor himself was born in 1946. Okay, before we jump into this video, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to go very deep and tell the story in a different way than I usually do. Anyway, 1945 and 1941 would both be interesting years for Kreese to be born, because Pearl Harbor was in 1941 and the atomic bomb was in 1945. This would go well with his no-mercy tactics, but if he was born in 1941, he would graduate college in 1963, which would give him years of room before the Vietnam War even started with America. But we can get a specific year of his birth by figuring out the rank that he was. We know Jon Crease left the military in 1975 as a captain. A captain requires 4 years of service, and the next rank, a major, requires 10 years of service. You can have 10 years of service and still be a captain. 10 years the year that you become a major. So he could have started serving in 1965, since his Army career was done in 1975, but I think he left in 1973 and came back in 1975, and you'll see why later. Don't worry, these technical details are going to end pretty soon. So if we add a bit of that year 1975, we can get 1966, which would make the most sense, because the draft for Vietnam got big in March 1965, so if you get early 1966, that would be a good time for him to go. That would make the most sense. Now, was he college age or high school age? If it was after college, his birth year would be 1944. And if it was after high school, he'd be born in 1948. I'm sure Kreese is more than 3 years older than Silver, though. So I'm going to say he was born in 1944 and joined the Army in 1966. Not much is known about Jon Crease's childhood or his parents. I'm pretty sure Terry Silver's parents died, but with Kreese it's hard to tell. Did Kreese's parents die too in a terrible accident, and that's why him and Silver bonded? Daniel and Johnny's dad died, so maybe Kreese's dad died. That'd make an interesting plotline. Or his dad was killed at war. Even more interesting. Let's say that Kreese's father was killed at war when Kreese was a baby. This would make sense because Kreese's birth was at the height of World War II. So jot down on your timeline that Kreese's dad died during the Second World War fighting the Japanese in 1945. On Okinawa, maybe, which explains why Kreese is angry and hates Miyagi. And you might be saying, oh, that's because his student beat his student, but he was pretty rude to Miyagi in their first encounter in the dojo. But anyway, another reason that I think that Kreese's dad died at war is that Kreese went to Vietnam War because he wanted to fulfill his dad's legacy. So if that makes sense, that would be a very important plot point. So let's say Kreese lived with his mother, who was torn from what happened in the war. His mother was always sad and overprotective. Kreese then became a rebellious teen in the 1950s, like most kids did who turned away from their parents. Kreese was probably bullied as a kid in the 50s as well, and learned his first street fighting skills then, and became an angry young man. Another question we come to ask is, where did Kreese grow up? Kreese has a very northeastern accent, and the actor Martin Kove was born in New York City. Maybe he grew up in Newark like Daniel, or possibly Philadelphia. Let's say Kreese lived in Philadelphia. This would make sense because that was a tough city to grow up in during the 50s. Kreese graduated high school and started college in 1962. Maybe he went to college in LA. Nah, I think he went to college in Philadelphia. He then developed a sense of isolation in his years of college and decided to join the military to fulfill his dad's legacy since he didn't feel like he had the potential to do anything else. So after college, which would put us in 1966, Kreese joined the U.S. military. I'm not sure what base he would go to, but I'm guessing it was miserable and cold. So let's go with Fort Drum in New York. Kreese learned a lot from his basic training in 1966, probably learned a lot of jungle warfare tactics he would use later in Vietnam. The next year, 1967, I'm going to say that he is sent to Vietnam. I can see many of his friends dying. The weather's warm, and Kreese likes that, and even though he dreads his death, he wants to stay, believing he'll get the cheers from all his family when he returns, just like his dad got. He is never lost, and he doesn't think that he's going to lose this time. He becomes angrier and angrier, though, with each passing day in the new sweltering, humid climate. By 1968, he is a guerrilla warfare master. On a trip to Seoul, South Korea for his troop to stock up on ammo, he meets a karate master who fought the Korean War 15 years prior, named Kim Sun-young. Why did Kreese meet him? I'm thinking right now that Kim Sun-young is an Army drill instructor that happened to know karate that took a liking to Kreese's attitude. Since Kreese had no father, Kim Sun-young takes Kreese under his wing and tells him about the real world and how it's not like good old Philadelphia. Kim Sun-young tells him life shows no mercy, so why should we? Kim Sun-young teaches Kreese that in war, everyone is the enemy, and to kill or be killed. The famous lesson taught to Kreese is, strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Kreese, after training for a year, thinks he's a wise man full of experience, but he's still especially angry and sad. One day, a new man joins the troop, a young, confused 17-year-old private named Terry Silver, who lied about his age to get in. Now, let's stop and look at what happened in Silver's life. Nobody is born completely evil, so this must have a root. Rumors have gone out that Silver's parents died when he was 17, which would be 1 year before 1969 when he joined the U.S. military. But I'm going to say his birthday's in October, more technical stuff. How did Terry Silver's parents die? According to the Karate Kid Wiki, Silver's parents died in a car accident. That sounds way too similar to what happened to Julie Pierce's parents from the Karate Kid 4 in the late 80s. But again, how would two people die of the same disease or different diseases? That sounds like too much of a coincidence, so I'm going to say they died in a car accident. Terry Silver's 17 years before were normal. Karate Kid Wiki says his father was a notorious gambler, so Terry learned to distribute money fairly, but that doesn't sound completely right to me. I feel like both the mom and the dad were compassionate and athletic, which shows why Terry Silver is so athletic. Where was Terry Silver born? He has a northeastern accent too, and the actor was born in Connecticut, but he seems a bit Californian on the other hand, so I'm sure his family moved to California when he was a kid, similar to what Daniel LaRusso and his mom did. He's pretty athletic, so I'm going to say he did sports in high school, and now has graduated from high school, and it's the summer of '69, and the Vietnam War is at its peak. Kreese has seen a lot. He's been there for 3 years, knows that Vietnam is like hell. Now, Kreese sees this happy-go-lucky, ready for fun teenager and feels sorry for him. He can't let this kid go out in the jungle thinking it's a playground. Jon Crease slowly becomes his friend, and sides with him in many arguments since Terry Silver is bullied by the rest of the experienced men in the barracks. Kreese takes him under his wing and teaches him the real rules of war and how to be experienced. Silver is also trained by Kim Sun-young and learns the rules, strike first, strike hard, and no mercy. During the first battle that Terry fights in, he is shot in the chest and is carried to safety by Kreese. Kreese goes on to save his life many times in the humid Vietnam jungles. After observing a cobra kill a tiger in the jungle, Kim Sun-young goes on to tell them the cobra symbol. In Korea, both Kreese and Silver get cobra tattoos, which become a symbol of their brotherhood. Now I'm pretty sure that Terry eventually becomes a better fighter and developed the Quicksilver method, which he uses in combat. You know the whole, if a man can't see, he can't fight. If a man can't stand, he can't fight. If a man can't breathe, he can't fight. Kim Sun-young probably taught along the lines of this. Silver just came up with the phrase. After Terry Silver became good, the first Cobra Kai classes were taught by Kreese, Kim Sun-young, and Silver. The first Cobra Kai classes were soldiers, which explains how Kreese taught his kids like soldiers, and called them soldiers, and used the analogy of war a lot. These classes either started in late 1969, or early 1970, so jot that down on your timeline. After teaching these classes, he was awarded to be the U.S. Army Karate Champion, a title which he would hold for 2 years. Kreese and Silver got a lot of glory for the next 2 years, but towards the end, things got gruesome. Kreese was at the height of his game by late 1972, and was sure of winning like he always had. He had the Karate Champion title for 2 years, and had finally ended his service. By 1973, the peace accords were signed, and victory had came. I think Jon Crease bought a house in South Vietnamese City even after the U.S. got victory. I'm sure Terry Silver flew back to the U.S. on January 27, 1973, and probably went to attend college. You may be telling me, wait, what are you talking about? The United States lost the war. But did they? The peace accords were held on the 27th of January 1973 by Richard Nixon, which agreed to ceasefire and ended the war, signed by U.S., South Vietnam, North Vietnam, and the Viet Cong. This day was known as Victory in Vietnam Day. In case of any more fighting, U.S. President Richard Nixon promised to supply the South Vietnamese, but this didn't end this way. Tension in Vietnam started again in 1974, and a small amount of troops were still there. By January 1975, the President Gerald Ford ruled out any more fighting in Vietnam. But that is not what happened. By early February 1975, Kreese was called back into action for the war. Kreese had felt good about himself winning another victory, even though that he was devastatingly scarred by the things that he had seen. Kreese and his troop were back and saw the North Vietnamese burn down the villages. Kreese was devastated as he was wounded and carried off the battlefield. The North Vietnamese had won a sneak attack. Kreese wasn't backing down though. By April 1975, he was back and ready. But as he went out into the jungle, he didn't know that the North Vietnamese had already taken large parts of the country. It was April 30th, 1975, and the capital city of South Vietnam, called Saigon, had fallen, and the communists were at rule. Gerald Ford had begged the new Congress to support the South Vietnamese like President Nixon had promised, but the Congress refused. Kreese that day, he was ready to attack. He saw the airplanes land and begin to carry people out. Devastation struck him. He was done for. The U.S. had lost. He saw his troops scramble onto the airplane as they were flying away. As the last one began to move, he jumped on, because if he didn't, he would become a POW in Vietnam, which could have been his death. Kreese marked this as the day of darkness. He had lost. His country had lost. His country had lost for the first time, and same with him. Jon Crease told himself as he flew into L.A. that he'd never lose again. Kreese decided to start a career in Los Angeles because he was used to warm, tropical Vietnam weather. Now we know how he became this. When he returned home, he was treated like crap. His house was vandalized, and he was called a baby killer. Same with Silver. Kreese and Silver became outcasts. Silver had gone to school and was majoring in physics and minoring in business, though. Then, Terry Silver invested some money in a company, I'm going to say IBM, and made thousands for Kreese. Kreese took the advantage and opened his own dojo the following year. So jot down 1976 as the opening of the Cobra Kai dojo. Why did he open it? He had been a student, and it was his job to teach more students. And his new goal was to never let them lose. By the way, this video was too long for me to make in one part, so part 2 is going to come out right after this, so make sure to watch that. Thank you for watching. Subscribe. See ya.